man, it was a bit of a surprise actually. Sons of Anarchy. I mean, it is a popular show, obviously, but it's not one that comes up in conversation as much as, say, from the same era, Breaking Bad and its ilk.
No, it's an interesting point, and it is a contemporary, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Breaking Bad. I mean, one of the things. So I've been listening to a podcast called Reaper Reviews, which has features Theo Rossi and Kim Coates, who are two of the principal actors. So that's the guy who plays Juice and the guy who plays Tig. And they've over lockdown they revisited the whole show and watched it episode by episode, and it's fun for a lot of reasons, because they're obviously, they hadn't seen the show, although they were in it. They never actually sat and watched it, because you don't when you're working in TV. You're too busy making the next episode and stuff. So they'd seen the premieres and the finales, but that was it. And so they were almost discovering the show alongside the listeners, which is fun. But one of the points they make quite early on is that they were talking about how Sons of Anarchy started the year after Sopranos finished.
Oh, really?
Which is really interesting to think, which is why that actress who plays the mother of Jax's kid, yeah, there you go, she's fresh off Sopranos.
Goodness gracious, going from the Sopranos to Sons of Anarchy. Psychologically, that's wow. She'd clearly just not had enough of being tortured by men babies, because right. What show came first? I know that this show is 2008, which surprised me for some reason. And Breaking Bad is also 2008. The first season of Breaking Bad is 2008. But which one started airing first?
Oh, that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Something I'd have to look up. But
it's clearly there's something in the water around this era, right? Like sort of 2008, the mid 2000s. There's something in the water of American television, which I suppose in retrospect you could call cynicism pornography or nihilism pornography.
The joys of the internet tells me that Breaking Bad premiered in January that year, so I'm assuming that came first.
I would assume that came first, and so Breaking Bad kind of paved the way, really, because it did very much break bad, didn't it? It became a phenomenon, right? When it first hit, it became incredibly popular and made this kind of show where everyone is compromised, everyone is a victim of their own trauma and their own cynicism. Very, 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 very bankable indeed.
I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? I think you're right about that. I'd say that we've already talked about Sopranos, which I think is an antecedent to this show in some ways. Although I think Sopranos is perhaps doing some more complicated things, I would say, perhaps in some ways than Sons of Anarchy, a lot less complicated than others actually, but maybe we'll get into that as we go. But certainly you've got, and Deadwood I think is the other touchstone for me. That's, in terms of cynicism porn, arguably there's some of that going on. But I think for me the real one, the only other one I'd want to mention in that conversation that I think does predate Breaking Bad and Sons by a few years is The Shield. Which is another.
Now you're talking. You say, now I can contribute. I still have to think Breaking Bad. I keep trying to watch Breaking Bad and don't. I've never seen Deadwood.
Oh, really? Deadwood is superb. Deadwood is wonderful. And interestingly, it does a very similar thing to Sons of Anarchy, which is its casting is deliberately facially interesting. There's like a topography of faces that goes on in these shows. I mean, Breaking Bad does a similar thing, actually. But it's something I really noticed with this rewatching of Sons of Anarchy. The faces of the actors, not only are they universally fascinating, they're all really interesting. Almost, I mean, obviously with people like Ron Perlman, almost like caricatures. They don't look, they're people who almost don't look real.
Yeah, there's almost
a lot to say about Ron Perlman, definitely.
I agree. There's almost a larger than life or comic book quality, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. It's certainly true of all of the men who are in the Sons of Anarchy. That is absolutely true. But before you came on, Kit, Steve and I were just discussing Gemma.
Yes.
Facially, she is fascinating. The actress is doing such fascinating, interesting things in almost every scene that she's in. There are little looks, there are little asides. There's a lot of storytelling happening just silently, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking I've rewatched a few. I mean, I watched the whole of season 1 fairly recently, but I rewatched a couple of key episodes this week in prep for this show, like over the weekend. And I watched last night. I watched the season finale. There's an amazing scene she has with Clay in that, where they confront about the you know about her dead husband's burnt notes, and to what degree Jax is on the wrong track. But there's an amazing moment in there where Pullman almost jumps at her, almost physically. I mean, he points right at her, but it's very aggressive and the way she reacts is incredible, because she goes incredibly still.
Yeah.
And a lot of what goes on in that scene is nothing to do with what the two actors are saying, although they have a lot of lines in that scene. But there's so much of it comes, and it really kind of hit me in that moment. Like, it's Katie Segal. She's just phenomenal.
Oh, she's great, isn't she? She's just like she is one of those actors who's mesmeric.
Yeah. When
they're on screen, and of course, I mean, she's got to be, because most often she's acting against Ron Perlman, right? And Ron Perlman he's so visually interesting that there is a tendency for him to dominate anything and everything that he's in. If he's on screen, you're watching him, right? And she's got to be able to stand up to that. She's got to be able to provide some contrast to that, and she does it beautifully.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a phenomenally well cast show. It's in fact, I think, interestingly, I think it's because I'm glad we're doing the show, because I mean we'll do that kind of formal round in a minute of like where we all started with this. But I mean, I'm really glad. One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was because I wanted to get some different perspectives to my own on the show, and I've got some things to say about the writing, and not all of it is going to be complimentary either. But I do think
opinions, Kit.
I do, I'm afraid, have the odd opinion, yeah, which I'm happy to get into as we go. But I do think this is one of the best cast TV shows ever. And I think, actually, funnily enough, I think The Shield's another show like this, where I actually think sometimes, and The Shield isn't a badly written show by any means, but there are times I think when the cast elevate what's on the page significantly. And I think that's also true of Sons. Although I guess another way of putting that would be the writers knew they could write to these actors. I mean, you could put it that way, right? So I don't want to give Sutter too little credit as a writer either. He's clearly a very skilled TV writer. But the cast is absolutely incredible, and that hit me so hard this time through, because part of my thing with this show. So I guess I'll just sort of do a little bit about my background with the show. Like, I've only watched it through once prior to this, and now I'm watching it as a second time in preparation for these shows as we record. And I cannot immediately recall a show I've simultaneously been so fascinated by and repulsed by as this show. And I've seen a lot of TV that goes to dark places, but there is something about Sons that I find there's a real scab picking quality to watching Sons for me.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And like, especially from like season 4 on, it is very, and it's signposted. It's very clearly an elevator ride to hell, right? Everyone is just, it's all going down, and it's just how badly is it going to spiral? And there is something darkly compelling about that. But there's a repulsion as well. There's a push away. So I'd be very interested, and like I say, that's my background with it. But I'd be curious to know as we start this podcast, like what are your two's history with this show? How long have you What?
Oh well,
George,
thanks, Steve. I was introduced to it by my brother. We were around that period. We were both having quite a difficult time.
Right.
We were both kind of like fairly impecunious and finding getting work very, very difficult. So we were both a little bit depressed. And he introduced me to Sons of Anarchy. My brother really likes anything that involves any kind of like gangster lifestyle of any kind. He's just into that. That's his media. And I started watching Sons of Anarchy on his say-so, and I found it very difficult to watch during that period. It is like depression on screen a lot of the time. One of the things the writers are doing here, it's exactly the same that the writers do on the likes of Breaking Bad and things like The Walking Dead and whatnot, where it's how bad can we make the situation and get away with it? How bad can we make the situation without everything disintegrating? And if it does all disintegrate, can we follow that? Can we actually follow that thread down into the depths of hell? And that's what the show does. I found that after the first few seasons, I stopped watching it because it was making me feel bad.
Yeah.
It was making me feel really awful inside. And that wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it. That was I was enjoying it. I was enjoying it on a kind of technical level. You know, I could see that the writing is good and the acting is good and the way it's framed is really beautiful. But it was just doing something to me. So it wasn't until quite a long time later, when it was available on Netflix, that I came to watch it again and watch the entirety of it. It was still pretty harrowing, I've got to say. It is still and you are right, there is a signpost moment, isn't there? Because like the first, it is awful. You know, the awful things happen throughout every season of this show. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, like the first few episodes, what do you have? You have a woman who almost basically commits suicide whilst pregnant with drugs, and a baby who has awful problems as a result, who is then poisoned by her mother-in-law, and it's just awful, you know. But it gets worse than that, doesn't it? There is something. The first season, at least, does this thing where it takes you to the depths and then it gives you something else. It sort of drags you up out of it. It resets the situation. You know, there is a sense that things will return to some sense of stability. But after that, after the signpost, I'd say probably around the end of season 3, beginning of season 4, it doesn't. It just keeps going and going, and it's kind of relentless. You know, it drills down and down and down and down and down, and just there is no hope of reaching sunlight ever again.
But you, Steve?
That's reasonable. I remember a few years ago talking to my niece about this. We were sat around at her house having a brew, and she'd seen maybe 3 seasons at the time, and she was just getting into it. And well, she's just getting into it, you know, she's like 30, 40 episodes deep. And we were chatting about it, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell you how it ends, obviously, you know, because that's just mean. So, oh, no, don't do that. No, it's not. And I just looked at her dead in the eye and went, it doesn't end well. and then there was a beat of silence, and I just said, for anyone. It really doesn't, and we'll talk about that in 6 episodes time, but the point I want to make is you know that from the very beginning. You go in, you think nobody's coming out of this story well. No. Look at the state of all of them.
Yeah, there is a sense from the very beginning that these are damned people, right?
Absolutely, yeah, completely.
And it does. I mean, the show is aware of this as well. It actually does feed into that imagery. I mean, you get a lot of framing, certainly after really traumatic events have happened, that's almost religious. It's like it's recreating Renaissance paintings or something with these bikers and gangers and whatnot.
I don't think there's anything almost about it. I think it's entirely religious.
Yeah.
And again, the further we get into the show, the heavier that's going to be ladled on. Coming to the somewhat infamous conclusion of the show.
Right.
In answer to your question, Kit, how did I come to this? I came to this because I adore The Shield.
Right.
The Shield. I could talk for an hour about The Shield on its own, and have on more than one occasion. The Shield it's just a sublime show. As you say, Sutter, again, for anybody that doesn't know, created both.
Yeah.
Wrote a lot of both, and The Shield is. I think it's a cracking show. As you say, like SOA, it's elevated by the casting, which I'll talk about in a bit. But for my money, The Shield has the most perfect ending of any television show in the history of television.
It is superb, yeah.
And I would die on that hill if needs be. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Which we may talk about a different day in a Shield podcast. That's perhaps down the road.
Well, up for that.
Great.
After a break first, though. Then. A break first. I mean, I'm not sure I could go from watching Sons of Anarchy to watching The Shield, because I am going to watch this all the way through again now. I mean, I've even this evening, I will admit, I transgressed onto rewatching season 2. Yeah. So it's done now. It's got to be done.
No stamina for some of these people, honestly. I tell you what, listener, I committed to this from the beginning. right? You don't pay no attention to these two. Who came to me with the idea, I should point out. God damn it, I'm committed. So I adore The Shield. I watched The Shield. I found out that the guy... No, I didn't find this out. I didn't then know about SLA for a while. And then I heard about it and I thought, do I care about a biker show in California? Probably not. And didn't watch it.
Right.
And then a few years later, it came to my attention that Kurt Sutter had created both. And I thought, oh, well, because The Shield was quite good.
As established.
As I may have pointed out, maybe I should chance my arm with this.
Yeah.
So in I dive headfirst into SOA, and I'm presented with Hamlet on motorcycles.
Yeah.
Just to drop that in at this early stage, because it basically
is, isn't it?
No, I think that's a really important point. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. And there's no going back from that. As soon as I start, and it's like, well, yeah, I'm sold. Then I'm in.
And what's great is it's Hamlet from the first episode. I mean, one of the things that struck me this time, having relatively recently watched the season 7 finale, because it was only a few months ago that I watched the last few episodes, it opens with the same image that the entire show closes with. It's the dove and the blackbirds and it was like, I was like, okay.
Just to be a dick for a moment, Kit.
Yeah.
They're crows.
Crows. Yeah.
Of course.
The clue's in the name.
Yeah. All right.
Once again, listener, amateurs. I don't know.
Well, this is why I wanted you for this one, Steve. We needed the expert opinion. George and I will just make up any old shit and just waffle. We need that accuracy check.
That's our milieu, I'm afraid. That's how we roll.
Literally, that is how we roll.
You say expert opinion, I say snark. Let's just in the middle somewhere. Yeah, they're crows. Yes. Funnily enough. They better be crows now. I'm going to look right there.
Actually, they're rooks. We'll find out at some point.
Yeah.
I don't think rooks are native to California. But anyway,
Sam just doesn't have the same ring to it for some reason.
It doesn't, does it? No, it sounds softer, doesn't it? Somehow.
But you were talking earlier about the religious imagery, and that's obviously there, but it's also classical, because if you're talking Shakespeare, you're also talking Greeks and Romans. This is ancient storytelling. This is unfaithful women and deposed dead kings and treacherous brothers.
Yeah, absolutely that.
And it's all there. But what I love is how much it's baked in from the premise. Because the final shot of the pilot is another one that looks like a cross between a classical image and a religious one, where you have Jax at his son. His son's in the incubator, but it could as easily be like a crib or a manger, for Christ's sakes. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
There's Jax and the baby, and then behind him there's Gemma, and behind her there's Clay.
Yeah.
And their faces tell it all, because they're all looking towards the camera, but not at each other. Jax is looking at the baby, she's looking at him, he's looking at all of them, and it's this incredible. And looking at that tableau, having just finished 7 seasons, of being like, this is the whole story.
Yeah,
all the elements are right there at the very, very beginning, and I cannot help but be impressed by that, considering this is a show that is full of event and action and burns through plot. It's incredible how season 1, episode 1. Oh, they're beefing with the Mayans. Oh, Jax wants to get out of the gun trade. Oh, I
mean, that is one of the things that's so impressive about the show. It's certainly impressed me this time around, the complexity of everything that's happening, and yet the fluidity with which it's told. There's incredibly complex politics happening within the club itself, let alone everything that's going on outside of that in relation to the town, the police, the other gangs, and so on and so forth. The incredible awareness of symbolism, which is throughout the show, and yet it doesn't ever feel heavy. It doesn't feel like it's ever weighing down upon you in that regard. It's very clever. There's a speed and a fluidity to the storytelling that I'm kind of in awe of.
Yeah, I agree, and that was something I was really thinking about, was all that, because again, it's back to the casting partly, but it's that huge ensemble cast. You feel like you know all these characters, but the other thing is nothing is static. None of the relationships are static. They always feel like they're shifting ground. They always feel like they're sparking off each other. They're going in different directions. They're responding and having to react to events, and those are bringing out more problems.
Right, you never quite know where anyone really stands, do you? There's like an inscrutability, despite how expressive the actors are, there is an inscrutability to the relationships here that makes them very complex, but not in a contrived way. They're believably complex.
But here's the other weird thing. Despite all that activity and despite the fact that within the characters there doesn't really feel like there ever is a status quo, it feels like constant movement and motion and change. The plot elements remain remarkably static because the entire 7 seasons Jax is trying to get out of the gun trade. I was genuinely shocked to see it in the pilot because I was like, how the fuck do you spend 7 seasons not getting out of the gun trade? How the fuck? But they manage it, and it somehow in the moment it feels plausible for a given value of the word, right? You're taken along by the story. So it's that, to me, like, I'd really love to unpick how the show manages to simultaneously have so much going on, and yet it does preserve, there is this kind of weird sort of state, but it's almost like that's the Greek tragedy element, right? Like they just cannot break out. Right. Of the structure around them. Almost
metaphysical, isn't it? It's almost metaphysical. It does feel as though there are unseen and unspoken forces that are keeping them in place in these cycles because that's where they're meant to be. They are like Dantean damned souls, right?
Let's put it like this: if you did a prequel episode that had John tell at Jax's father, and he meets 3 elderly women at the side of the road, and they tell him that he's got to form the Sons of Anarchy, but he must forever sell guns that he's got from the Irish. I'd buy that.
Yeah,
completely. Right. It's like they've been cursed because I don't understand otherwise.
It wouldn't surprise me in the least if something like that wasn't even discussed at one point around the writing table. And they rejected it because that's a bit too on the nose, maybe.
I know. I believe it's actually currently in pre-production at Netflix in some kind of bizarre anime.
Oh, there you go. They're doing it, of course they are.
I'd watch that, though. I would watch that.
Actually, a Sons of Anarchy anime, I could go for that.
Well, I discovered only today that there are, in fact, 2 comic book series of Sons of Anarchy.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, comic books, I think that would be a fantastic format for this. Yeah, I could see that working.
Yeah, I could. I mean, I'd love a prequel at some point. I think a prequel show set in the 60s with them, all getting back
with the first 9.
Yeah, with the first 9, exactly. And seeing. I mean, the story of Gemma and John. I'd be
right.
Because we talked about Hamlet, but of course the other Shakespeare play that this is Macbeth, right?
Yeah.
Back to Gemma for a moment, but my goodness, because. I think you can make an argument that Gemma's the main character of the show.
She's definitely the driving force, isn't she? She's very much the driving force. Without her, things just don't go as far as they ultimately do.
Oh, it's all her.
Yeah, I think
absolutely, it's all her.
Yeah,
you can say that. Clay's the president. Fine. Well, Jax is the identifiable character in as much as one can identify with any of the second. Which sadly I do identify with, at least. Well, Bobby Elvis for me. But anyway, I very much see myself as Bobby.
I like Juice. I got to be honest. I like Juice.
I'm very fond. I want to do my hair like Juice.
Juice is just a puppy dog. Juice just fell. He's like the classic kid who fell in with the wrong crowd.
He really is. Yeah. He's Linus.
Yeah.
And that's my week gone. Now I'm going to be picturing Sons of Anarchy as Peanuts characters.
Yes, please, someone with an artistic bent, please do.
That's perfect. Because I've got this image of Jax turning to Gemma and saying, "You promise you're going to let me kick the football this time?" And Gemma's like, "Yeah, I promise, son. This time I'm going to let you stop selling guns from the Irish."
It really is. No, you're right. Juice is just. Oh, he's just so sweet, Juice.
so pure. He really is so pure. I mean, I love that scene in this season where there's a wonderful moment where they've knocked out a couple of the coppers with these knockout drugs, and they just give him a juice, and he says, "What is it? It's vitamins." And juice just immediately canes three of them.
I mean,
fuck it, I'll give that a punt. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, right.
You absolute fucking idiot.
The naivety of this guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's completely... He doesn't have ideology at all, this guy, does he? Unlike the others, he doesn't really have a belief system. He's just there and following. Absolutely. Because he doesn't have anything else.
I do feel like I need to just mention the follow-up to that event.
Yes. Yeah, go on.
He's waking up the next morning with a sign stapled to his chest. So he's just glorious. He's such a good character, and I know we'll talk about subsequent seasons in subsequent episodes, but Juice's storyline is subsequently is one of the most heartbreaking for me, and that comes from a show.
Yeah,
it is. It's heartbreaking, and that's from a show that brings you Opie Winston.
Yes, indeed.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
Which is a storyline that just broke the hell out of me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No,
again, Opie. I mean, Opie is one of those characters that a show that hates all of its characters hates especially.
For some reason, yeah,
it really does. Why? What the hell?
What
man?
did Opie do? I mean, what does Opie? I don't know. Represent someone that the writers hated in real life or something? Because it almost feels like that.
I feel like it's like if Sons of Anarchy is a biblical retelling, I feel like Opie is Job. I just feel like
yes.
It's just yeah.
Whilst we are briefly back on the biblical subject, I just want to mention a little something, which is the most oft-used phrase in 7 seasons of this show. Do we know what that phrase is?
Nope.
No.
Complete silence. Jesus Christ. All the time. It's Jack's go-to. It's Clay's go-to.
Yep.
It's everybody's go. Gemma all the time. Jesus Christ. It is. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fine. It's just an expression, but it's. I don't know that it's entirely random. The choice of that expression.
Give it in context with all of the other imagery that's going on here. You suspect not, right?
I mean, it's really, yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting decision. I mean, one of the things that is interesting about the show as well is that because this is the vagaries of when and how it aired, because it aired on American network television, you can show people getting shot, you can show people simulating making pornographic movies, providing you don't show their breasts, but you can show naked butts and all that other stuff. And you can show drug deals and you can show gang fights, but no one can say fuck. No one's actually allowed to say the word fuck. So it's because it's shocking when you get. I mean, I've not to do this one because it's a whole set, but I started watching the Mayans, and the Mayans was on a different FX channel, and they were allowed to say fuck, and you could tell the writers were visibly like, at last,
God, yes.
Presumably the writers said thank fuck. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would imagine that's exactly what they said. Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe they said Jesus Christ. I don't know.
They probably said Jesus Christ. As you've probably gathered, I've made various random notes that don't really inform anything. They're just things that jumped out at me while I was watching it. I've watched season 1 in the last 2 days.
Right.
So I watched 5 episodes yesterday and the rest today.
Wow.
So I wanted stamina. I wanted to come back on a point you made earlier, though, what you were saying about Juice. So the 2 things about that sequence you were talking about. The first one was that, according to Theo Rossi, the actor who played Juice on this podcast, that photograph of him in the baby suit is the thing he has signed more than anything else.
I'd be amazed if that wasn't true.
In like 10 years of Comic-Cons, that is the one that people bring to sign, which I just think is wonderful. But the other thing, the other thing I thought you were going to mention there is that the other trade-off gag that happens with Juice and drugs, which is I think in the next episode, or it might have been in the previous one, is when he's supposed to dope up the Doberman.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he gives it crank.
That is superb. And again, I mean, you get some quite graphic mutilation as a result of that. It's a bloody scene, right?
It really is.
It is. And again, Juice is completely unaware.
Yeah.
He has no clue that he's done something wrong there.
Well, that's like, even when Tig says to him, "You gave the Doberman crank."
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do you want me to shoot it now?
I mean, actually, that is something about the show that struck me this time round. I mean, I don't think I got to appreciate it the first time, given the sort of context that I was watching it in. But its comic timing is superb. There are lots of funny moments in this show.
Oh well, then now, if we're going to talk about amusement, there is my favourite amusing shot in this show. Yes, it must be episode 12. It's either 11 or 12. So Clay has tasked Tig with killing Opie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they go off, they set up this deal, which they set up to go wrong. So that Tig's got the opportunity to kill Opie. And it's in a fucking doll warehouse.
That's right.
And Tig's just like, I don't like dolls. I'm like, whoa, that's boring. And there is a beautiful shot where just in the middle of all this gunfight action, Tig falls over in some dolls.
That's right.
Look on his face.
And some of them start talking, and he's just horrified. It's wonderful.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is the Sergeant at Arms. Okay, this is not just a club member. He is the Sergeant at Arms. He is the guy who does the bad shit.
He's an ex-Marine, this guy.
He is exactly that. Yeah.
And he's also the guy who has a very, very peculiar relationship to women in general, right?
Oh my god!
Is this the door we want to open at this point? Because this is
I think we have. Oh, look, I actually, you know what? Can we use this? Let's go through the door. But here's how I want to frame this bit of the conversation.
Go on.
I need your help, both of you. Explain to me why I find Tig adorable. Because he is an awful human being.
He is awful, isn't he? You know, I think a lot of it is the actor. I think a lot of it is the actor. There is a slightly winsome charm to him. But that's for damn sure.
The reason you find Tig adorable is because he has no shame. He has no concept of anything that he's doing being wrong. I mean, it's not like he's going in and he's doing bad shit and going, I know this is bad shit and I shouldn't be doing it, but I am. He's not. He's going in and just doing whatever his impulse drives him to do on that occasion, whether that is his cock or whether it's his head being told to do something like Clay. Right? You know, I've got something to tell you, Clay. What's that? Those two dead Mexicans. I was hitting them both. Great. Thanks for that. You know,
look, I think for that, just in case. Just in case there's anyone listening to this that hasn't watched season 1, hasn't watched it in a while, I just want to. This is just season 1, Tig, right? Let's just go through it a second. So, there's the fact that there are these two dead illegal migrants that have burned alive as an accident as part of the other gang attack of the warehouse fire. Then it transpires that Tig was having a physical relationship with.
Yeah, very delicately put, kid.
At this moment, are you telling me that one of them's got a belly full of Tigger juice? Oh yeah, both of them.
Both of them do. Yeah, it was a kind of taco twofer thing, is what he actually says.
Fantastic.
Like you what now? And then, by the way, his solution to that is no, just let me in the morgue. I'll just pour some bleach in their bellies. It'll be fine. I'll just open them up and bleach their bellies out.
Yeah.
No one will find the
DNA. I
DNA.
the fact that this leads to a story. It actually leads to a story element. Yeah. It's utterly brilliant.
No, you know what? That is a good point, because you could just do that for shock value, but they don't, right? There is actually, it has consequences, this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But this is also the guy, I mean, there is a moment in this, and again, talk about comic timing, his delivery is flawless, but there is a moment in this where Gemma slams past him on her way to do something that she's not supposed to do, and he just rolls his eyes and says, "This is why I beat up hookers." And it's, what the fuck, Tim?
Right.
Man,
again, shouldn't be funny, shouldn't be endearing.
It's not good, man. And then like to distract the nurses so that they could steal the ID to get in the morgue. He just shows them his ass. I mean, he just shows them the Rottweiler bite in his ass and says, "I think it's getting infected. Could you like?" What the Tig? What the fuck? And then to top it all off, this is the guy who murders Opie's wife.
Yes.
Yep.
Like. This is because, and I love the scene, by the way. I love the scene he has when he goes to Clay after chapel and he says, "Opie's turned. I found a tracking device in his phone. There's another one in the truck. He has turned." And it's really weird because I remembered this as being primarily driven by Clay. But Tig's the one who says, "This has got to happen.
Right.
This has got to happen." And the look in his eye when he says it, man, he is fucking angry, you know? And it's like there's a club within the club. You know, you've got this supposed democratic structure, which hopefully we'll talk a bit more about, because I am fascinated by that aspect of it as well.
Yes. I have that written down. Yeah.
But then within that, you've got this shadow government.
Yeah.
Which is really just those two, right? It's just
playing pig.
Pig. And I love it, because I love there's that wonderful line where Clay says, I've seen shit like this before, it rips a charter apart. It's like, dude, I think killing one of these guys might cause you some problems. I don't know, I'm no expert, but like, what the fuck? But it's almost like there's a pull to the darkness in both of those characters, you know, like there's just a pull towards violence with both of them.
Violence and domination, right? Control.
I do want to recant slightly something I said before, which is that Tig has no shame ever, and that's not true, because he does. He has one moment of shame.
Okay.
When he's talking about killing Donna.
Yes, that does cause him a moment's consternation, doesn't it?
That's the one thing that he says, this wasn't what I meant to do, and it went wrong. And I feel bad for that.
And I think this is part of the clue as to why I do find Tig adorable, in spite of the fact that he's an absolute sociopath and a terrible, terrible human being. That scene, I mean, again, the actor Kim Coates, he knocks it out of the park. It's an amazing scene. But that scene in episode 12 where he turns to Clay and he's like, I had Opie, I had him, I was behind him and I had him, and I couldn't do it. And the way the actor plays it, it's like he's working it out as he's talking. It's
like he's confused at his own reaction, isn't it? He doesn't understand. He's been able to do things like this before, and it hasn't been a problem. Why is it a problem now?
Now, you see, I think that's quite interesting, because you were saying about how a potential throwaway moment, what would have been a throwaway moment maybe in a different show, it actually informs a plot. And that's what I thought about that moment. Had it not, right, and this, bear with me, because this might sound slightly ridiculous, had it not been in a doll warehouse, I think Opie would have died that day.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yes, so if he wasn't in a state of... Right, he's in an emotional turmoil anyway, right?
He's in a state, for admittedly the most ridiculous of reasons, but he is. He's in an emotional state, and he's off his game.
I think that's a really good point. I do also think the significant thing is the fact that literally 30 seconds before, Opie saves his life.
True.
But you're right, but he saves his life because he's freaked out. No, you're right, it all tracks, it all fits together. He's off his game, and therefore he gets dropped, and therefore Opie saves him, and therefore he can't kill him. No, it is all connected. Absolutely.
You stem from that, and you say, well, actually, that leads into four years worth of storyline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming from that ridiculous concept of Tig can't be around dolls.
Again, a joke.
The whole of OP's storyline.
Absolutely, a kind of ridiculous joke. Again, becoming the source of sort of incredible back mythology.
Because without that, OP dies that day, and with that, Donna dies. OP's distraught. He comes more into the club. He meets and marries Lila.
Yeah. No, it all spins out.
And everything leads. Sorry, spoilers. Everything leads to him having his head staved in.
Yeah.
I should. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll say something at the start. We're going to be spoiling every. Right. We're going to spoil everything.
We're going to
not just season one. We're going to spoil future seasons as well. We have to.
Absolutely.
If does not end well for anyone.
I think we should call the show that.
No, I think that's a good one. Yeah,
it does not help well for anyone.
I like that.
That's good. But
the only other thing I was thinking about if you wanted to title this show at all is there is a quote very early on in the pilot episode, which is Clay to Jax, and he just says, "It ain't easy being king."
Oh yeah, no, actually that's good. Yeah, that is great.
That is good.
Well, what I love about that is Clay actually says, "Just shoot me in the back of the head." Yeah. He's like, "I don't want to be
right here, just at the back of the head."
Yeah. So great.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's right. Because then Jack says it's not easy being king, and Clay immediately steps back and like, "Yeah, remember that." Like,
yes,
it's right there in the pilot. I know you want my job, kid, but you don't want my job. It sucks.
Yeah, you don't want to be paid. It's dreadful.
It's so good.
So when Jax becomes him, it's dreadful.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely fucking dreadful. Yeah, it's really tough.
I mean, it's part of the incredible, like, pervasive, grinding cynicism of this show, isn't it? That it doesn't matter if you have good intentions. It doesn't matter if you have any kind of moral agenda at all. Nope. The world's going to defeat you. The world is going to defeat you and punish you for it. In fact.
No matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing that I think is interesting though is like Tig's kind of impulsiveness as well is something that comes back again and again. I mean, my memory is it's the season 3 finale. I might be wrong about that, but the action Tig takes at the climax of season 3 that effectively sets up the whole rest of the show, right? And it is catastrophic.
Remind me what his.
So this is where Tig. So Tig, if it is the end of season 3, I might be misremembering, but it's where Tig goes after the family of the guy he thinks has killed whoever it is he thinks he's killed in season 3, and he ends up running over the daughter of one of the gangland bosses.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
it's either 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think it's 3 because I think the start of season 4 is when Tig gets the payback for that, which is actually when I had to stop watching the show for a while because it just upset me so much.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I had to stop watching the show for a while because Titus Welliver's fucking appalling Irish accent, but we'll get on to that.
Well, yeah,
that does seem to be a consistent theme in American network shows, doesn't it? You know,
come back to that issue. Yeah.
And I love that man as an actor, but for fuck's sake,
yeah, right.
But one of the other things I like about season 1, and I think actually, you know, your point there, George, was interesting about how you'd forgotten about the humour in it. I mean, I think part of the reason for that is, sadly, I think to the show's detriment, a lot of that humour bleeds away as it goes on. It's more prevalent in the first season, but I love
that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's present in the color palette of the show as well. Like the first season of the show has a reasonably light, open, airy, breezy quality to its color palette. As it goes on, that kind of bleeds away. It becomes much more claustrophobic. It becomes much more close focus and much more paranoid.
Yeah. But the other thing I think is really interesting is how in this season, in a series of apparently effectively standalone episodes, it actually builds up very effectively a picture of the town, but also sets the scene for so much of what's to come. So I'm thinking about like episode 3, where you have the assault, you know, the rape of the teenage girl and the biker gang exacting their own form of justice. But of course, part of biker club. Part of what's going on there is
they're motorcycle enthusiasts.
That's right. Yes,
and mechanics. But
and mechanics.
But part of what's going on in that episode feels like it's saying this is why Charming puts up with the Sons of Anarchy, right?
Yeah.
This is how this operation works. We already know they've got the chief of police in their pocket. We need to talk about him as well, by the way, because he's what an actor that guy is.
He's superb, isn't he?
Yeah. So I know him from Deadwood, but this role is just phenomenal.
That face, that lugubrious, wonderful comedian's face.
Yeah, in this really tragic character. I mean, just tragic, right. Tragic from the pilot. This guy. I mean,
innately tragic, you know. But yeah.
But I love how that episode. It apparently is just setting up. This is how it works in Charming, and this is why this is good. But of course, it's actually also setting up blackmail material that will run right into season 2 at least. Right, the knife comes back again and again. So it's deeper than you think. Again, the patch over party is establishing the wider universe really of the show, which you can only gesture out on a TV budget. But the idea that they've got chapters not just in California but as far away as Nevada, and these sister clubs that they're kind of connected to, that stuff is all world building that's going to come back in really important ways in season 2, and especially you know the trip to Ireland, which I think is that season 3. I think that's
season 3.
That's season 3.
Yeah. So that it's all starting to build that world out for you and give you that sense. The really throwaway episode where they get their revenge on the guy who put Opie in prison, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Now see, that's something that I need to talk about.
Yeah.
The viscerality of that episode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And just, you know, bringing him into the garage and they're just like knife or fire. What the fuck, dude? What?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that actually specifically for a second? Because I don't understand why you pick fire in that situation. I really, really don't. Unless you're worried about bleeding out, I do not understand why you pick fire.
I guess fire is going to heal better eventually.
I don't think so. I think your chances of dying of infection are massively increased with fire.
Rather than having a 2-foot square slice of skin flayed from your back with a hunting knife.
Still think I prefer that to 3rd-degree burns. I don't know.
I mean, you see the kinds of conversation that we're led to have on the show, ladies and gentlemen. I mean,
I'm just not convinced. I mean, he does pass out from the pain, so maybe. And
there is actually it is quite a horrific scene when he passes out, and you get to see the extent of the damage on his back.
Oh yeah,
gruesome, absolutely gruesome.
Dreadful.
But again, in that moment, you think they're just kind of establishing that these are seriously bad hombres, right? And that you know, this is the code of honor within the club, and this is how serious it is if you fuck up, and that is true. But of course, you know, I immediately flash forward to, 3 or 4 seasons time when Clay is forced to have his tattoo covered up. Because Clay gets the boot, and then they black out his Reaper tattoo because you can't have it if you've been booted out, sort of thing. So, it looks like standalone stuff. It looks like world building stuff. It is those, but it's also almost all of these moments are going to pay off. And again, I'm staggered by the talent involved in the storytelling.
Yeah, that is some incredible writing, isn't it? I mean, you have to. It's one of the things. It leads you to wonder, like, were there ideas floating around when they started to include these elements, or did they develop from the inclusion of these elements? It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm willing to bet that when they did what they did in episode 3 with the blade and the clown rapist and all that stuff. Yeah,
as he's credited.
As he is literally, that is his credited. I didn't. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that they did probably know they were going to pay that off because they kind of say it, don't they? Clay's his fingerprints are on the knife, kind of thing. And then, of course, that's the episode that ends. That is the episode where Juice takes the drugs, because that episode ends with him waking up in his nappy, right, at the sign. But then, as he staggers off, you see the testicles come out the post box, right? You see the package that Clay has put in the post. It's just like, oh, come on. Like,
it is bizarre to say, isn't it? Because it is like a primetime show, right?
Yeah.
You have to sit and watch it. It's not the kind of show where you can go and do something else, because if you do, you're going to miss so many essential details.
Yeah.
No,
and as you say, if you're not paying attention, you can look at that show and you can look at that episode, and you can look at those 2 scenes and you can go, okay, there's some offal on the floor there. And then a few minutes later you can go, okay, there's an odd shaped package. But if you're paying attention, you follow the one to the other and you go, that's knackers in a bag.
I was going to say, surely an elaborate pun. The fact that you've got a package of a package.
A package of a package, indeed.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. No, it's so good. It's
actually, now that I think about it, that kind of pun is itself Shakespearean. So they're really...
Yes.
Well, and I'm pretty sure that's, castration features in Greek tragedy or more than one account. Like it's something that cropped up for Greeks. The right.
If it's mentioned, yes,
once or twice.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
So, whilst I don't know why I'm saying whilst we're on the subject, we're not on the subject of anything, are we?
Whilst we're on the subject of severed genitalia, yes, continue.
Whilst we're on the subject of the first season of Sons of Anarchy, because that's about as narrow as I can. So we've talked a little bit about Clay, about Jax in passing, about Tig. I mean, these are all massively flawed, and in the case of Clay and Tig, definitely, like really, really quite fucking nasty people. I just want to mention, if I may, the worst character in this season, Agent Cone. Awful human being.
Yes.
Against the background of a gun running, murdering motorcycle club. It's the DEA agent who's the bad guy.
Yeah, right. And he's actually painted as the bad guy in the show, right?
Yeah. He really is the bad guy.
No, he is. He is. I mean,
I mention him specifically because of who he is. Because he is. He's the guy who played Dutch Wagenbach in The Shield.
Yeah, he's an alumni of The Shield. Yeah, that's right.
So he is the first kind of major Shield character to have a role in SOA. I mean, Casey Segal was in The Shield, but only in one episode. But we'll see as we go through the show that all 4 of the main Shield cops have roles in this show, to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, Lemonhead has quite a decent supporting role, as does Ronnie. Vic, Michael Chiklis, has a very minor role towards the very end. But of course, Shane excels as Venus Van Dam in later seasons.
Oh man, I mean we'll get to it. We'll get to it when we get to it. I suspect Walton Goggins. There's some stuff to say about Walton Goggins in this show.
There's a lot to be said about Walton Goggins in so many ways.
I mean, I love him, by the way. He's one of my favourite actors. I think he's fantastic.
Isn't he he's just fucking sublime once again, and him and Tig. Anyway, moving on. We'll come to that in a few weeks.
Yeah. Oh, if we get onto it, we'll go forever. Quite frankly.
But one of the things that I want to mention about Cone, and it's kind of tangentially about Cone, is his ending.
Yeah.
He gets killed by Jackson after attempting to rape Tara.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting, and you may, I have watched this in the last 2 days, but I don't claim to absolutely be entirely certain on this, but I'm fairly certain he is the first person we see Jackson kill.
I think so, yeah.
So
now, Jackson kills Whistler, who's one of Darby's guys, but in self-defense. So Whistler shoots him, and he stands around and just sprays the guy.
Yeah.
And then, in actual fact, when Clay says to him, "Finish him,"
he can't do it. That's right.
He's reluctant, and he watches as Whistler dies, and then he goes, "Right, it is finished.
It's finished, done." Right? Yeah.
But Cone is the first person we see Jackson murder.
Yeah.
That's
now we know he's done it before. We know that he's killed because he wears a Men of Mayhem patch when we first meet him.
Yeah.
Right. For anybody that's not familiar with this, as we're talking about the kind of rules and structures of the club, the Men of Mayhem patch is awarded when you kill on behalf of the club. I mean, Happy, I'm assuming he's got about 400 of them.
Happy's got an entire cut that's just made out of Men of Mayhem patches. It's a waistcoat.
And I'm coming back to Happy because I love him. Right. Anyway, so Jax is wearing a Men of Mayhem patch when we first meet him. So we know he's killed for the club before. But Cone is the first person we actually actively see him murder on screen.
Yeah, like execute, just completely. Yeah, also, while he's down as well, you know.
Oh god,
The other death that we're talking about in the pilot, that was a self-defense shooting. There's no it was kill or be killed. And as you say, there's the reluctance to actually deliver a coup de grace, which pisses Clay off, and that's interesting in and of itself. That dynamic's right there for the pilot. But you're right. No, it's very, very significant. I think that.
And it's significant that the first time we see him kill, as opposed to react, it's not for the club.
No, it's for personal reasons.
No, and indeed, it kind of gets him in shit with the club, because the next day when they're all like, "Where the fuck were you?" Like Juice has had his finger up someone's ass all night, waiting for Jack to turn up with the clouds, right? And there's because there's that confrontation with Gemma, isn't there? Yeah. Where Gemma's like, "Where the fuck were you?"
It gets him grief from everybody else.
Yeah.
Because in actual fact, he's done all right, and this may be slightly questionable. He's done the right thing.
Yeah, agreed.
The girl from the nasty rapist.
Yeah.
By admittedly shooting him in the head while he was on the floor. But still, the motivation is as pure as anything gets in this show.
But I also love that moment where, because he's really explicit about it, because she he's on his way back to the club with the medical supplies when she phones. He comes back and he literally and she says, "What are we going to do?" And he's like, "Okay, you call the police. You won't get in trouble because it's self-defense. He'll go away for assault, and then a few years later he'll get out.
Yeah, and do it again.
Or then
whilst I'm here."
Yeah, and that's great. And then of course, the guy in the coat, like he seals his own fate by yelling out, "You stupid bitch, turn into the biker." Once a biker saw, always a biker saw. It's like
that's it. That's when he does it. That's when he does it. Yeah.
See you later.
I think because in Jax's purview, this guy is totally. There's no coming back for him. He's a monster. There is nothing to be done other than exterminating him.
But I also think it's in line with Jax's morality as relates to his father's morality and the whole ethos of Sons of Anarchy, which is something, again, this falls away in later seasons, but you keep getting these voiceovers from John Teller, and it's clear that he's a man who's thinking about, he is thinking about the practical philosophy of anarchy. What does it actually mean in practice to try and do a version of this in the real world?
Yeah.
And you feel that John Teller for all that John would not approve of much of what Jax does in subsequent seasons, you feel John would completely approve of that execution.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I don't think there's any
that.
question.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question. I mean,
no, John had done exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cohen is irredeemable at that point.
Well, and it is an amazing performance. I mean, that is one of the best creepy villain performances. You know, like, it's so, because what's great about it is you can see the man's mind working, and you can see how he is constantly redrawing reality so he's the good guy or the victim.
Yeah, that sort of misogynist narcissist thing that he has going on. He plays it beautifully.
You can see him doing it in real time as a performance. It is extraordinary. And yes, it is well written. It is absolutely well written. But the actor just smashes it. It's so good.
And it is. I think it's something that this show handles very well across its entire run. When you look at, I seem to be making a habit of referring to things we're not talking about yet. When you look at Alan Arkin in the next season, Alan Arkin and Rollins.
Yes.
Titus Welliver. Your man whose name currently escapes me, who was Michael on Lost, who plays Damon Pope later in the run.
Right.
They're all outstanding performances of irredeemable, morally bankrupt characters against the background of a morally bankrupt town.
Yeah.
Now, for that level of bankruptcy against a baseline which is way elevated.
It's part of the intrigue of the show, isn't it? The fact that you have this sort of moral playground, I suppose, where you have these extreme characters who are all varying degrees of immorality made manifest, playing against one another.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is the show requires you to buy into a certain level of unreality in order to do that. And I do want maybe this, I don't know if this feels like a good point to talk about that. I do want to get into this a little bit. One of the things, so there's things that I find that I think are just ridiculous, but I just say, okay, it's ridiculous, and I let it go. And there's stuff that I think is not quite, is kind of interesting in that it's clearly not this reality, but what it's reaching for is really fascinating. So if I can just deal with the stupid briefly, is that okay? The business model of the Sons of Anarchy as gun runners. I'm just going to say this out loud. So that what they do is they buy guns. Now, bear in mind, they are an American biker gang. They live in California. They buy guns from the Irish, from a splinter Irish Republican Army terrorist organization. They buy the guns off of them that they, by the way, the Irish, we discover are getting from the Russians.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Russians are buying the Irish terrorists are buying guns from the Russians, selling them to a California biker gang, presumably at a markup, because they must be making money, otherwise why would they be
I was going to say, I'd presume it must be a good markup as well.
I've never thought of the IRA as not-for-profit, so I guess...
Exactly, not really. So that they can make money to do what exactly? Buy political power in Northern Ireland? And those guns are then sold on by the Sons, presumably at a further markup, to street gangs in Oakland. That's the business model of this fucking class. It's like none of this makes the slightest fucking bit of sense whatsoever goddamn ever. And I've just got to say it once out loud, and then I'll forget about it because it's a great show. I love it, but that is fucking stupid. That is
ridiculous. I can't argue with that.
No,
I don't understand why. The only thing I can think is because this happens. It's something you get in US crime drama a lot. They're obsessed with people selling illegal automatic weapons as though that's the problem with gun crime in America. The problem is the fucking Saturday night special you get from the pawn shop or the gun show. Like those are what are killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every fucking year. No one's running around with AK-47s. They don't need them. They've got a bump stock for their AR-15, man. They're fucking good. All right? But no. So, but also I think there's a point here about morality, because I think that the obvious business model for the Sons of Anarchy is drug dealing. That's where the actual money is. But I don't think you can have even anti-heroes and have them be drug dealers. I just don't think you can.
Well, we'll find out in a couple of seasons' time.
Sure. So I think that's part of why it had to be gun running, because there's this kind of weird political thing where you can say, yeah, okay, but it's just guns, you know. Like,
I don't know, because like, you know, contemporaneously Breaking Bad did it.
Yeah, but I think we're meant to love this outlaw gang. We're meant to.
Right. I think, yeah, you are right. There are characters that you're meant to identify with more closely. I mean, the thing with Breaking Bad is, you know, they're bad guys immediately, and that's the point. You know, it's how awful can these people get, and how can we keep the audience watching without being so totally repelled by them that they turn off, right?
I mean, I want to finesse what I just said a bit. I think what I mean is, I think like Jax, we are meant to love the idea of this club.
Yes. Yeah, almost like the ideal of the club.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the first couple of seasons at least, I think part of the reason we're supposed to see Jax as our identification figure is not necessarily because we agree with the decisions of the choices Jax is making, but because we share his feeling of like, this could actually be something kind of cool, and it's just not. You know, it's lost its way somewhere. It's not what it should be. Of course, what's fascinating about that is if you zoom out a bit, if you think about what that's saying culturally about America in 2008,
right?
That's really, really interesting, because the other thing about it is the other side of it that I really want to get into, because this fascinates me, is Charming itself. The idea that Charming has made a deal with an outlaw biker club, and the deal is, you guys basically run this town and we leave you alone, whatever crazy shit you're doing, as long as it stays out of this town. As long as you keep the trouble. And it's almost like a weird kind of gated community vibe. It's almost like a kind of weird. And the other thing about, like, and this is more in season 2, but they hint at it in season 1, and then it really is the thing about, like, Cones has the line. They're sitting there and he says, you know, the Sons of Anarchy are stopping this town from growing.
Yes, there's almost like a sort of anti-globalist philosophy here, isn't there? You know,
kind of anti-capitalist, but certainly, you know what? It's not anti-capitalist at all. It's anti-corporatist.
Yeah,
specifically, it's very pro-capitalism.
Yeah,
they are. You know,
but also, I mean, yes, that is said, but it is also demonstrated, even in this season.
That's right.
When they're referring to Elliot and holding leverage over him.
Yeah.
And if they hold leverage over him, they can ensure he doesn't sell his land.
That's right. And that's why they want it, because they don't want Charming to. And, you know, that's what's really interesting about that is that it's Clay.
Yeah.
Clay's the one who turns around to Jackson and says, this is why I'm doing this. You know, brackets, you fucking idiot. You know, like,
I've got a plan, shut your hole.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fascinating that that's Clay's plan. So on some level, Clay is in love with this small town. You know, and it's Rockwell shit, right? This is 50s America. This is like, and of course it's complicated by the fact we don't know this yet, but the Sons of Anarchy is a racially exclusive club. So that's a big old yikes from me.
Yeah, it's very peculiar in later seasons, isn't it? When you actually get them contrasted to actual, like, self-professed white supremacists.
Well, I think that's deliberate. I think part of that is setting it up so that when you find out later that Sons of Anarchy are racially exclusive, you're like, okay, that's bad, but they're not the fucking Aryan Nation.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you get to season 7, and even then,
it's like,
we'll get there when we get there. But that's when I start getting really fucking angry. About Jax's life choices. But yeah, I think that is interesting. I think that in this first season, the setup of this idea, and of course, what's great is the show immediately starts exploding its own myth. Of course, you can't keep the fucking violence out of Charming. Of course, you can't bubble this shit. Of course, it's going to end up coming back. And of course, the fact that fucking Clay is the one that ultimately that does it by setting up the Donna hit the way he does. Oh, so good.
It's Hell's Angels Altamont. It's,
yeah.
You know, we'll employ the rogue element.
Yeah.
We employ the rogue element, then we have some sort of control over the rogue element. No, you fucking don't.
No.
Obviously you don't. If you employ the rogue element, what you're doing is giving them free rein to do what they like. And if you're lucky, what they like will coincide with what you want.
Yeah. And I think there is that, but there is also the thing that is really big in season. And again, this is why I think in season 1 the Sons couldn't be drug dealers, because part of the deal they have with Unsa, right, is like you keep drugs out of Charming.
Yeah.
And there is that, and that is something that they do police quite heavily in the first season, because that's why they end up in the confrontation with the Aryans, right?
Yes, of course, yeah.
And there is a thought, you know, there's a kind of underthought of, well, if they had gone into drugs earlier on, then maybe they wouldn't have had this relationship with Unser. Or they would have had it, but it would have soured earlier on. And you think that until you learn about who Unser is. Because he will do fucking anything for that girl. At all. There's a beautiful moment with Unser when Jack sells him the fuel.
Oh, yes.
Looks at Jack, he's like, can you just pretend for a minute?
No, it's so great. The other great Unser line from this season is when Jax is breaking Half Sack's girlfriend out, and she turns to him. She's halfway out the jail. She says, "Aren't you the chief of police?" And he says, "I don't know what the hell I am anymore." It's such a great line.
Wayne Unser has got to be one of the most tragic characters in this show. And again, this is a show that brings you Juice and Opie. But Wayne's character arc. He's broken when we meet him.
He is.
He's still the chief, but he's on his way out, and Hale's going to replace him. And he's broken already. And that's before we find out he's got cancer.
And
cancer which will ravage the man completely.
Oh gosh, absolutely devastate him. And we haven't really talked about Hale yet, which is interesting because Hale is one of those characters. I know Hale comes to increasing prominence, right, as the show goes on. Certainly for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, he's very prominent in season 2. That's for damn sure.
But they're already setting him up here, and I think he's actually a really, really interesting character as well, because I like how his moral arc just becomes more and more complicated as season 1 plays out. Like, it starts out straight up cops and robbers, right? In the pilot, he's turned into, and I love the kind of honor of it. He's such a Boy Scout. The way he turns to Jax, he's like, "Hey, look, fair warning, Unser's been turning a blind eye. I'm not going to."
Yeah. His morality is binary, isn't it? It's completely
binary. Yeah, it's total Boy Scout stuff. And I love how he just gets more and more dragged down as as he gets into the relationship with Stahl, which I think we need to talk a little bit about.
I think because we probably need to talk about Stahl, the Terminator.
Oh God! As much as we've talked about there already being a villain in this show,
June Stahl is a villain that lasts for several seasons, and again has a beautiful payoff, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But I love.
She is. You're absolutely right to call her the Terminator. She is just. She's Catherine Trammell. She's. To me, she is the archetype kind of late 80s, early 90s psychosexual thriller villain.
Oh, she's so good. But the other thing I love about her in this is, and they almost make it text actually, when she has the confrontation in the supermarket, she is Gemma with a badge in a lot of ways.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I love that,
Yeah, they even look kind of similar. They do their hair kind of similar. So when they have the confrontation, there is a sort of Mirror Darkly thing going on.
Well, see, this is something that I was going to mention earlier on, just as a generic thing, just as an aside, as a general thing across the whole show. It is a show of mirror images.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kit, you mentioned earlier on about the opening of the pilot episode mirroring the closing of the series finale.
Yeah.
The Doves and the Blackbirds.
Yeah.
That's not going away anytime soon, by the way.
What do you call them? The Rooks, yeah.
Sam Blackbird, yeah. And actually, the opening scene of the opening shot of the pilot is Jax on the road solo.
Yeah, that's right.
The closing scene of the entire show is Jax on the road solo.
Yeah.
But there's this mirroring goes on throughout the entire run, throughout the entire 7 seasons.
Yeah.
And Gemma and Stahl is a perfect example of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's like Tara and I never remember her name, but the mother of Jax's child. There is Wendy.
Yeah.
Wendy is presented as a drug addict. Well, Tara is also an addict. She's addicted to, as Jax points out, running away from her problems, right?
And yes, Wendy's a criminal, if you will. Wendy's a victim.
Yeah,
she's a criminal, but she's a victim criminal.
Yeah,
whereas Tara's a healer. Tara's the flip side of Wendy.
Sure.
Except that she's obviously not. She's Wendy who took a different fork at one point.
And interestingly, Tara's backstory is interesting too, because this is where we learn, you get that thing about her returning to town ostensibly to clear out her father's house.
Mm-hmm.
Her father's passed away.
That's right.
But we also, we get that bit of background, like her dad was alcoholic. There's an implication he might have even been a bit abusive. She's been struggling with her own issues. She's addicted to running away, but she's got good reasons to run in each case.
She does.
Oh yeah.
It's also clear by implication that she's attracted to dangerous men, right?
Yeah.
Possibly as a result of her relationship with her father.
That's interesting. And of course, and then the big question mark is how much of a role Jax plays in that, because there's the fact that they were high school sweethearts is really interesting. I mean, I do want to say this actually, because this is a theme that I'm not going to spoil the Mayans, because I know none of you have watched much of it yet.
No, I haven't watched the Mayans yet.
But I will say is the one thing that the Mayans made clear to me, if Sons of Anarchy hadn't already, I'm just very, very grateful to whatever teenage girl it was that broke Kurt Stutter's heart in high school, because we got some good telly out of that, man. And she did the biggest number on Stutter's, because this is a theme that recurs. The childhood sweetheart thing is a big fucking theme on both shows, and it's fascinating because it's again, we were talking earlier about Shakespeare. These two, it's fucking Romeo and Juliet. It's doomed. It is totally doomed, and it's doomed because it's Romeo and Juliet with Lady Macbeth sitting behind Romeo.
That's it. Tara basically condemns herself the moment that she concedes to be part of Jax's world. She's damned. She's going to be tainted somehow.
I mean, you're right. We do know. We know from the earliest that it's Romeo and Juliet and it's going to end badly. But that's not the point. The point is that they both know as well.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Both of them know that this relationship is going to end badly. And not just badly, but as badly as it can get.
Yeah, and Gemma does too. Interestingly.
Yeah,
Gemma absolutely does. Yes.
Well, that's why Gemma, in a weird way, that's why she's trying to set Wendy up right the whole way through the first season. She's trying to get Wendy and Jax back together, because she's thinking, well, maybe, because she knows she can control Wendy completely.
Yes.
Right.
Is she though? I mean, she does for a while, but she also tries to put Tara and Jax back together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complex.
Is she in fact just playing them off one another to see which one she can manipulate?
Right, or which is worthy, or whatever.
Worthy. I don't think she gives a shit about there being a good woman. I think she gives a shit about being able to control the woman that's with her son.
And the reason for that is because she wants to control her son ultimately, right? I mean, let's not forget, like the first one of those really early scenes between Clay and Gemma that again sets the tone for the entire show. Is Gemma's the one who says to Clay, "You got to get this kid in line. He's got to follow after the right father." She's scathing about John Teller.
Yeah,
she really is. Yeah. This is way before we know anything about John whatsoever.
In a way, by the way, that Clay isn't. Clay rarely gets that angry about John.
No,
Gemma's the one with a real hard on for John. It's really strange.
Yeah, there's only one scene that stands out to me where Clay does get really angry about John's writing, and it's when she's confronting him about the fact that Jax has been reading his writings, and Clay is like, it's poisonous shit by a cowardly man.
Yeah, but even there, when he's doing that, he's angry at Gemma for bringing it up, and his point is and what's interesting is Clay's line at that point is like, Jax is fine. This is your shit. This is your
fear,
guilt. This is your fear. And he actually says, quit bleeding all over him, which is a fucking amazing line.
It comes up again and again, actually. They all use that term. Gemma uses it later in season 2 when she's pretending that she hasn't been assaulted and that she's had, and she claims she's had a car accident. Right. She actually says to Clay, "I'm sorry for bleeding over you with this." It's like, interesting.
While we're on this topic, as we've circled back to Gemma again, which we're going to have to keep doing because she is.
It's rather difficult not to, isn't it? Because she's kind of like the void, isn't she, at the heart of the show?
How many members of how many of the characters in the show do we think are actually in love with Gemma? We've obviously got Clay. We've obviously got Jax.
Half Sack, obviously.
Half Sack. Oh my god.
We haven't even talked about Sack yet.
We haven't talked about Sack. That kid. That poor kid. You know what's funny?
How did he not come up earlier on when we're talking about characters who happily just drop trowel whenever?
No, that's true.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
We're like 2-3 episodes in. Why do they call you Half Sack? Oh, I'll show you.
I'll
Yeah.
show you. Yeah.
Yes, because
And
I
you
also love his sexual naivety. There are moments. There is one in, I think this may be in season 2 actually, where he literally just walks in on Clay and Gemma.
that's
Yeah,
right.
that's
Like
season
in
2.
the throes, and Gemma says something along the lines of
Join in or get out.
either join in or get out. And he does go, and then he comes back again and says, "Were
was
you
a joke, right?
serious? Did you mean that?" The naivety is oddly sweet.
Oh, half sack.
Yeah,
But he's a great character, and you get the feeling. I mean, I get the feeling like Juice just got patched in maybe 2 months before the show
Oh,
started. I feel like-
Juice is no pun intended fresh.
yeah. And
Jeez. Okay, fair enough.
all right, so Blackbirds, I'm going to get mocked, but you could just say that shit, right? Okay, I see how. it is.
Yeah, mine's accurate.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. But there's that. I love the relationship between those two because I love how Juice almost like. I mean, it's weird, but Juice almost like pathologically avoids Sack because he doesn't want to get like prospect cooties on him. You know, he's like, I just got out of that shit. I can't be seen. But there's so many lovely moments for Sack in this show, that in this season. I love the scene where after they burnt the guy's tattoo off, the closing shot. You've got Jack's up on the roof, and he can't even read. He's so disgusted with himself, he can't even read the memoir. You know, he tries to read it, he puts it down, and he looks over, and Sack's literally sweeping the blood off the concrete out of the garage door. It's just like fucking hell.
And lest we forget, Sack's glorious pinnacle moment in this season, robbing the fucking ambulance.
Oh, still
I'd forgotten about that.
God.
Yes.
He's like, where are you going? I'm getting my top rocker. No, you're not. Oh, you are. Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Utterly brilliant. He's so proud of the fact that he's done this thing as well. I took initiative.
Yeah, I used my imagination and I got this. And these things sell for like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's such a great scene, isn't it?
The state agencies, great. Well,
another thing is Chibs. He says, "Yeah, who are you going to sell it to then?"
Yeah.
It's like
to who?
Like a little private hospital.
Yeah, exactly. It's so great. And then I think that's where Tig says, "No, you know what? Keep it. Just go and steal us a fire truck as well. Then we can all get the uniforms." Fucking, But what I love about that is
bless him for trying.
Yeah, but what I love
of course,
about that is,
again, another joke that comes back as a plot point.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. That's what I love about it. It's a throwaway gag, except it's not, because the ambulance ends up saving someone's life, right?
Yep.
The Irish guy, right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's that wonderful line where like Gemma actually says, "You've got an ambulance. How have you got an?" They're just like, "Don't ask."
Don't ask. It's too long a story.
Who ends up literally at the arse end of that whole situation? It's Juice.
It's Juice.
Yeah, of course it's Juice.
Finger in the
Literally
orange
the arse
cells
end.
again for about 14 hours. You
want to talk about?
He has a wonderful. He has a wonderful. It's not really a back and forth with the Irishman because the Irishman is like almost dead at that point, where he's talking about how no, I don't have my finger up.
It's not up. It's near.
In your ass. Which I suppose
we've got to do the actual dialogue here. My finger is not up your ass. That would be gay.
Yeah.
It's in your ass. Which I guess is still kind of gay. That's what he actually says. I mean, it's just like, oh my god.
You know, I mean, it's such a weird thing. Like watching shows like this as a gay guy, right? Which are just, they are these little insular, hyper masculine clubs of homophobia. When you know, as a gay guy, that these clubs are, in reality, are hotbeds of homosexual activity.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
You just know.
And it's a character trait of Juice throughout the show. There's always an ambiguity to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Look in a few seasons' time where they end up in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
We'll deal with that when we get to it. In answer to your question, Kit.
Yeah.
So, Clay.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Tig.
Oh my god, so much.
Tig's massively in love with Gemma.
Completely in love with Gemma.
Bobby Elvis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chibs, in his own way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By that.
Obviously, Unsa.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't come out into the text until later on.
But it is there. He's been with her for
40 years.
When they share that joint together outside the hospital, man, it is there.
It's definitely there.
Sweet, isn't it?
It's there.
It's a lovely scene, that is actually.
Beautiful scene.
it's stated in the dialogue. Road that he's been in love with her for like 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if it were never stated in the show at all, you can see it. You see it in the way he responds to her. It's really wonderful. It's very well done.
Sack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, clearly.
Yeah.
I think Chucky to a certain extent.
Yeah. I think Chucky kind of worships her.
He does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That's more of a worship than a physical lust in any sort.
Yeah.
But then I think all of the other characters look up to her, no matter what.
Yeah.
And if I agree with all of those. I also.
Darby.
Yeah.
Darby definitely wants a piece of that Gemma ass.
Yeah. And he's conflicted about that, right? Like that.
Jew in her. Yeah.
Because she's Jewish, right? Jewish, so that's a problem, but that's also a thing. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And I feel like Hale's got that kind of, the older woman thing.
I think Hale would.
Yeah,
obviously Hale's done her mirror twin once already, so.
That's true. Well, because that was the other thing I was going to say. I also think Stool absolutely would. I don't think she's in love with her, but I think Stool would if the circumstances were right.
Definitely would.
Yeah.
Wrong, how you put it. Yeah.
Well, there's the bar's been lowered somewhat for the show now. Good.
No, but the thing is, it matters. This stuff actually does matter because the thing is that it's part of understanding why Gemma's such. I mean, that's a joke, but it's not a joke. They actually are all in love with Gemma, and it's really fucking important.
And I'm actually thinking about that. There is somebody else as well.
Jax.
Cherry.
Yes.
Cherry.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
When Gemma says, if you so much as smile at my man again, I'll stick my boot so far up your ass your cup size will double. And that look in Taryn Manning's eyes, and she's like, "Is that how your rat got so big?"
Yeah.
Oh, you know you would.
God, there's a flirtatious element going on.
You get that from that scene.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I did notice this time round is there isn't a slightly almost Oedipal physicality between her and Jax at times.
Yeah. Oh hell yeah.
Yeah. It is weird.
It is a weird relationship, isn't it?
When he greets her in the hospital and she's been looking after Abel and he kisses her on the lips and it lingers. It
lingers a bit too long.
There's a long old kiss there, yeah.
It is, and it's like, And then there's another scene where they're going through the old photos, and she's like, "How hot was I?" And he's like, "You were
smoking hot." It's like,
Mom.
Freud would have a field day, wouldn't he?
But that's what this show. I mean, that's what I like about this show, right? I mean, I've ragged on a bit about some of the idiocy around the setup, and I'm sure I'll have more things to say on that as the show goes on as well. Because
I mean, there are things. There are definitely things that come up. I mean, sometimes there's a bit of a whiplash between seasons. For example, the show sets up this situation that's almost. You can't see how they could possibly get out of it, and it gets out of it by just returning to status quo at the beginning of the next season. That's certainly what happens between season 1 and 2.
It's a bit Deus Ex Machina in places, sure.
Also, I think what's weird is we've talked a lot about the stuff that the show does well, where you get set up and payoff, and it is very good at that. And it's good at that across seasons as well as across episodes. You do occasionally get these moments that just kind of dangle and don't go anywhere, especially in season 1. The scene I'm thinking of particularly.
I'm glad you brought that up because you did mention to me earlier about plot holes, and I want to hear about it.
Well, I don't know if it's a plot hole. I don't think this qualifies as a plot hole per se, but I do think there is for me, one of the things I found very, very odd rewatching at this time. There's a scene where I think it's either in the pilot or episode 2. They get cut up while they're on their way to do some crime.
Yes.
This guy, and then on the way back they spot the car in the gas station.
Yeah.
And Chibs is all like, it's been a long night, man. Can we not just? And Jax, it's fucking Jax who's like, no, man, nobody cuts me up.
And the thing is, sorry, just to interrupt for a minute. What I find interesting about that is Chibs was the one that was really pissed off to begin with.
Yeah.
Because when they get cut up, it's Chibs is like, man, you spilled my beer.
That's right. Yeah, he's not happy.
But he's pissed at the time. And it's throwaway. Oh yeah, I've spilled my beer, but he is pissed at the time.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's Jax who subsequently goes, no, we're going to need to go and deal with this. People don't do this shit to us.
And the thing is, why exactly does that scene end up with a man with an axe in his head? And then Why does nobody ever talk about a man with an accident ever again? Like, all this shit about keep the violence out of Charming, blah blah blah, and it's a gas station, and this dude's ended up with an accident. Like, it's never spoken of again.
I don't think it's a gas station in Charming.
Okay, fair enough.
I think
But you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit like, considering how often like Jax's impulsiveness has consequences, and other members of the gang's impulsiveness has dire consequences. It's very strange to me that it goes that extreme, and then literally the next scene, it never happened. Like, like it's just evaporated. Like, you just dreamt it. It was just it's just strange. That's all.
So you mentioned plot holes. I thought you were going to talk about who it was that shoved the lace panties into the toilet.
No, I happen to know about that. So
does that actually get answered? Did I miss this bit?
No, it doesn't get answered. It was cut. So
okay.
It was. So again, I got this from the podcast. It was Juice. There was a whole set of scenes that were shot for that episode where Juice was stealing women's panties and then sniffing them in the toilet.
Of course he was. Yes.
Why not? And that all got cut, but they couldn't cut the toilet flooding because they needed that to get the sanitation truck in, which they needed to smuggle the guns out.
Right.
So they cut all of that and just left. So funnily enough, because Juice, the actor Theo Rossi was talking about it, he said what's hilarious about that is when it comes up at fan conventions, everyone assumes it was Tig, right?
Yeah,
well, obviously. Yeah,
because that's what I did. I assumed it was Tig.
Of course it's Tig. Everybody assumes it's Tig.
Actually, it was Juice. Apparently, there was a whole, and they shot the scenes, and apparently they might even be on the season 1 DVD extras. You might be able to see the scenes of Juicy stealing and sniffing ladies' panties. But yeah, and then the story is that he's sniffing the panties in the toilets, and then someone knocks at the door, and he panics, so he stuffs them down the toilet.
Because he's not wearing pockets.
Maybe, I mean, not when he's sitting down. I don't know. Look, it's Juice. Who knows, man?
Yeah, well, exactly that. Yeah.
Let's not try and delve too deep into that psyche. I don't want to know.
No. I think that's a mistake for practically everyone in this show. It's a dangerous endeavor, isn't it?
And there are moments of suspiciously helpful happenstance, like Jax just happens to drive past a guy in a semi who's had a massive accident, and then in the process of doing the Good Samaritan thing, just happens to discover that the guy's got speed, and that leads to and there's stuff like that where you're like, well, gosh, wasn't that convenient? But then at least as often the show does something like that, except then it's really not remotely convenient. It's actually terribly inconvenient, and it's a step on the path to hell. So I guess I'll give them the odd kind of moment like that. It's not actually, to be honest, it's not entirely clear to me why the Niners jumped the gun on the deal either. I'm not quite sure why they decided to attack that early. I'm not sure that ever really made total sense to me.
Oh, when the Niners and the Lions are.
Yeah, but the point is like that because I love the machinations of it, right? I love Clay going like, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to set up the gun deal with the Niners, but then the Niners are going to crash it after we're out, and they'll kill each other, and it's good for us, I like that. I like the cynicism of that a lot, but I don't quite understand what. I mean, it's great drama that the Niners turn up early, obviously, and start shooting at the Suns, and it becomes, and it kind of helps give the Suns cover with the Mayans about the setup as well. But although that's not, but it's never quite clear, because there's a throwaway line in the next episode where they're in the bar with Piney. We haven't spoken about Piney yet.
We haven't.
They're in the bar with Piney, and the guy, the leader of the Niners, basically says like, I think he says something like, we were pissed off about the supply issue, but it's like that's a bit fucking thin, man, to start.
I think the reason that the Niners turn up early is because Leroy's not a dick.
Right. Okay.
Well, he is and he isn't. He's not stupid, but he is a dick.
He's not stupid. Yeah, he's not stupid.
And he's like, well, no, fuck this. I'm not going to work on Clay's schedule. I'm going to rock up when I feel like rocking up.
Okay, I'll buy that. That's plausible. But we didn't. That's actually, it's interesting. I want to talk about Piney, but actually, it's a good way in is to talk about my favorite half sack moment in the entire run, which is actually in episode 13, and it's when he sent to tail Piney. And Piney is literally hiding behind a van and jumps out on him when he walks past. And they have this whole conversation, and Piney says, "You need to work on your stealth skills. You all but waved at me at one point." And Harsek said, actually, I did.
I did, yeah.
I was falling behind a bit and getting a bit lost.
When you were coming off the ramp at 38, I was waving to see if you'd slow down because I was worried I was going to lose. And it's just like that. And it is obviously it's a well written, funny line, but the delivery is just flawless.
Yeah,
he's so out of his league, this kid. You know what I mean? And he's so, but there's a kind of cute loser quality to him at that point.
Oh God, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
this is
kind of
just
for him.
It's not his world, is it? He's totally incongruous. He could almost be from a different show, right?
He really could.
Yeah, he really could.
I look at Stack and I think, how did you get into this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And why did you get into it?
Yeah.
You can only assume that it was accident, right?
I guess.
I mean, I feel like the same way a lot of them did PTSD, right? I mean, there are a lot of veterans in the Sons of Anarchy motorcycle club, and I don't think that's an accident at all. I think there are, so I think that's a big part of it. And of course, Piney's a vet as well, as we discovered, because he has the flag at the end of that episode. So we know he was a Vietnam vet. But I also what I love about that is he's so adorable that even Piney, who is a real hard ass in this show, like he's a grumpy old bastard. Even Piney kind of cracks a smile when he says it. You know, even Piney's like, "You goofball,"
right.
you know, like,
you're fucking useless, but we love you.
Because
you're right. Obviously, because Piney's military history comes out earlier on, of course.
Yeah.
In another one of those throwaway episodes where they sell the to his Vietnam buddy.
Oh God, yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Incidentally, which leads to another scene which is directly mirrored in the following series. The scene where said Vietnam guy, whose name temporarily escapes me, and his cohorts hold up the police at an intersection.
Right, yeah.
It subsequently directly mirrors Gemma's kidnapping in season 2.
Yes.
To the point where it might even be the same intersection. In which case people should learn not to take that road.
I think
I was going to say, this is one, in whatever metaphysical state this is, that is one of the more dangerous paths to take, right?
That's a cursed road in Charming itself, a very cursed town. Yeah.
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think Piney's such a fascinating character because first of all, we've got to remind ourselves this is Opie's dad, right?
Yeah.
And every time he interacts with Opie, I think he's a dick. Like he's gruff and tough,
chewing him out. Yeah, he's calling him useless, worthless, man up. It's all this sort of toxic masculine bullshit. Yeah,
and he sat there, and it's weird because he sat there with that oxygen mask the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's driving a trike, right? I mean, they must have bent the fucking rules a bit because there's this whole bit quite early on where Opie turns to, because Jax is talking to Opie about like the direction of the club and the gun running and all that, and Opie's like, and it's like Clay's never gonna change. She's never gonna leave gun running. And Opie says to him, but Clay's got like 2 years before his hands give out and he can't. And once he can't turn a throttle, he can't lead.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it's heavily implied that part of the charter of the club is you've got to be able to ride.
Yeah.
And
see, that's a throwaway line which comes to pay off later on.
Yeah. And you really feel like they're already kind of stretching the rules for Piney, probably because he's an original 9.
Because he's first 9.
He's on a trike, and like that can't really be. You know what I mean? Like that's got to be.
It's not entirely legit, is it?
It's not.
It's not entirely. But as you say, I think they stretch the rules because he's first 9.
Yeah.
Interestingly, however, they I don't know. Do they stretch those rules for Clay later on? Maybe they do. When Clay basically becomes Piney.
Yeah.
On the run. Whilst we're on the subject of the first 9, incidentally, I'd like to, if I may, raise who I think I'm remembering this correctly, that he is one of the first 9. One of my favourite supporting characters, Kurt Sutter himself, Otto Delaney.
Yes. Yeah.
Who's just he's barely in this season. He will come into his own later on. He does have that beautiful scene with Stall.
Yes, he fucking does.
Yeah.
He smashes her face. It's just.
Oh my goodness! How satisfying is that?
It's hugely satisfying, isn't it? But I
it's
love
awful. I mean, it's really visceral and violent, but at the same time,
But he's another one who has a very distinct character arc. He's incredibly loyal.
Yeah.
I mean, he's loyal to a fault, and I really do mean to a fault.
Oh yeah.
As will come out later on in seasons when he starts really taking punishment for the club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was shocked when I realised that was the writer, that was Shuck, because in a show not short of tragic arcs, I mean, that guy's story sucks from the beginning.
It really does.
He's already in for life.
He's in for life, and he's already lost one eye.
Yeah, and it turns out the
guy he's looking after is a chronic masturbator.
Oh God!
Lest we forget.
Yeah.
Chucky. Spoilers, I guess. Chucky's in the Mayans. I'm just saying.
Yes.
So great. But yeah, no, you're right. But his even his arc is horrific.
Yeah.
Because he starts low, you think, well, he can't have much left to lose. Oh no, he does, and he's going to lose every single bit of it.
Yeah, because he does have another eye.
Yeah.
Lest we forget.
Yeah.
This is again, it's a precursor to another episode. I am looking forward to talking about Lenny the Pimp down the road.
Yeah, okay.
I love Lenny the Pimp. Anyway, but no, he is, and again, he's another. Obviously, again, the writer of the Shield, the creator of the Shield, and write a number of episodes, but also a performer in the Shield.
Yeah,
playing basically a psycho Jesus in the Shield. But no, he's great. He's another one of those kind of supporting club characters who add depth and they add background to the story that is the club.
Yeah.
They do also have a massive role to play in and of themselves.
You know what though? I think the thing that's interesting about him, I think you put your finger on it. He's probably the most loyal member. A lot, and it's the one, and the one paying the heaviest price even at the beginning. Because if you think about it, like with all the others, like I mean, Clay's running a club within a club, right? Tig's a psycho at the end of the day. Tig's quite prepared to.
Tig's just a Tig.
Well, he's just completely prepared to throw the order of the club to one. So the rules that they all supposedly, this code that's supposedly so important to them. Tig's quite able to throw that entire thing down the toilet if he thinks that it needs to be done. I mean, I appreciate he's got his reasons, but that's a fact. Like he's not loyal to the club in that sense at all. Piney just fucking goes off, man. After Donna's dead, Piney's just like fuck this, and he just goes down to Niner territory and starts. Spouting off the N-word and pointing guns at people. I mean, he loses it, man. He's not loyal. Jax isn't really loyal to the club.
No, I don't think Jax is. I think Jax's loyalty is massively in question on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, almost from the first instance. It's his father's influence, isn't it? It's that ambiguity that's introduced almost from the offset.
But I get the impression that that's not new. It's not. He's not that he's found his father's manuscript and suddenly has changed. I agree. He's butted heads with Clay probably for as long as Clay's been married to his mum.
It's probably because he's got a little bit of his dad's academic qualities in him. He is smarter than Clay ultimately.
He is, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the only other character I guess I would say is I think Chibs probably is pretty loyal.
Chibs, I think, is the heart of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's.
If you want to look at the club and say, what's the core, the absolute, the purest essence as best we can get of this club? Chibs.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What he wants is to protect his club and love his brothers.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, he'll do what he needs to do.
Yeah.
To get it done, and again, he comes into his own later on in the run, and he's a character I adore. But he will do what he needs to. But he'll do what he needs to in defence of his brothers and his club.
Yeah. But I mean, we know eventually Juice is tested and is found wanting when it comes to loyalty.
Yeah.
And he has his reasons, but it's I think it's just really interesting to me that this character who, again, he starts the show in prison, missing an eye, prison for life. And things just literally get worse than that, and yet he's the kind of most stalwart in terms of loyalty to the entire idea of the club, and I just think that's absolutely fascinating.
On a metaphysical level, that's why he's punished, isn't it? That's what everyone is punished for. It's because they've sold themselves to this corrupt engine that is the club.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because the other one I was going to say, having said if Chibs is the heart of the club, then Bobby Elvis is the soul.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Bobby Elvis bleeds SOA.
Yeah, that's a fair comment.
Absolutely, no question. And you look at what happens to Bobby Elvis at the end.
Yeah. Well, you get that. There's that scene earlier in this season where, like, where Clay just casually says to Bobby, "Yeah, just do me a favor and just sexually assault this girl for me, so I can see if he's really like loyal." Yeah, sure, no problem, says Bobby. Like, I'll do that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. But he will. But Bob, again, Bobby will do. And again, apologies for kind of preempting later shows, but when subsequently Bobby is thought to have left the club.
No, I love that sequence because it
inspires later on that actually his loyalty was never ever in question.
Right.
And that's, again, we've touched on this briefly, and we're going to touch on this in greater depth in later episodes, because we can't not talk about the death of these major characters as and when
absolutely.
Of course, it's almost impossible when you know.
Yeah.
But the way that so many of these characters meet their end is genuinely heartbreaking, and Bobby Elvis.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's up there with OP. It's up there with Juice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's up there with the most heartbreaking moments in the show.
Well, I think that's for me the brilliance of what the show does. And again, this is I do have my issues with the show, and it does make me feel unpleasant a lot of the time. But I think one of the genuinely one of the genius things the show does is you kind of against your better judgment, you do fall in love with these characters, and then when the show happens to them, it hurts. It just does. And I think that's so. I know we're getting towards, we've got maybe 15 minutes, we need to wrap up. So there's a couple of points I definitely want to hit before we go. But before we do, Steve, I want to make sure that you get your chance to talk about Happy. You said you wanted to. Now, let's start with this. Happy's a nomad, right? In this season?
No,
he's not. Okay.
He's Santaz, Tacoma.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's tied to Tacoma in this season. He's from so the assumption is he's from California.
Right.
His mom lives in Bakersfield, and he's unwell, so he visits California a lot. But he's actually a patch member of Santaz to begin with.
Right.
It's in the second season that he goes nomad because he wants to spend more time with his mother.
Okay.
And then in the third season, he gets patched into Sam Crow.
Right.
That I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Happy. I'll be right. So first of all, can I just mention Happy's full name is Happy Lohman. Right, as in Death of a Salesman.
Yeah,
Nice.
Right. I just love that. I don't know why, but I do. It's beautiful. I love Happy because he is so unambiguous.
Yeah.
There are no shades to Happy. He is a fucking psychopathic.
Yeah, he's a killer. He's a stone cold killer.
He's the guy that gets the little smiley face tattooed on his abdomen every time he kills for the club.
Yeah.
And we see that happen in this season. And I think, and I didn't count this myself, I did look this up. I think it's the 13th happy face that's on his abdomen.
There you go.
Right.
That we see get tattooed on him in this season. And I just think he's just a pure character. He has pure motivation. It's the worst fucking motivation.
But
it is pure.
Yeah.
And that's a rare commodity, isn't it, in this show?
Yeah.
You know what you're getting from Happy.
Yeah, you do.
And as an aside, as a sort of behind the scenes, this may well be well known. I don't know whether it is or not. David LaGrava, who plays Happy, is not an actor.
Right.
He's a Hell's Angel.
He is a Hell's Angel.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was brought onto the show because he has legitimate first-hand knowledge of how
wow.
I don't really have a huge amount to say about Hap. I'm sure I'm going to come back to him in future seasons.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
Because I do love him. I adore him as a character. I think he's fantastic. But it is his unambiguity.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I am surprised to learn that he's not a professional actor, though, because I think his performance he has an incredible presence. Because it's, again, we've talked about this quite a bit. This is not a cast that's short on either personality or striking looks, and even so,
definitely not.
No, you're absolutely right there. Yeah.
when Happy's in the clubhouse, your eyes are kind of drawn to him, and that's very impressive when you think about the caliber of actor that you're dealing with in that show. And yet he's a really charismatic figure, I think. So that's really
he does. He has a way of delivering his lines that draw you to him.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's in this season. All right. So what I didn't mention earlier on when we were talking about how we came to this show. Yeah, I watched this probably 7 years ago for the first time.
Right.
And I've probably seen the whole run a half dozen times since.
Right. Yeah.
And I can't remember whether it's in this season or it's later on, but somebody says something to Happy like, Happy, you'll handle this, won't you? And he just goes, yes, I will. And it is, you tell him to do something, and he is the most loyal soldier, and he will go, yes, whatever that is, and he will do a fucking good job of it, no matter what it is.
I mean, his moments in this, right? Because he kills Alvarez's son in front of him. And that was part of the plan. That was Alvarez's plan. That was the payoff. But like, that is brutal.
That is an amazing scene.
It is an amazing scene. Yeah. And we haven't talked about the Mayans really either. I know that they come to more prominence in further seasons, but I love that actor as well. The guy who plays the head of the Mayans. I think it's a great performance. The scene he has with Clay in the prison cell. Yeah. It's so good.
Marcus Alvarez is he's fantastic. He's again another outstanding character, and this is a rival club leader, a rival gang leader, who's up against people like Leroy, so up against Darby, the mighty Pelegi,
right?
You know, the from the X-Files. Because again, when I started watching this show, I'm like, okay, so I know who Ron Perlman is. I've seen Kim Coates I've seen Tommy Flanagan do some work and what have you. And then Darby rocks up, and I'm like, fuck me, it's Skinner.
Yeah, it's Skinner,
and
right?
Old and a Nazi.
Yeah.
Or for listeners of a certain age and taste in films, the star of Wes Craven's Shocker, which nobody ever saw.
No! Horace Pinker, yes. Cripes.
Yep.
Nice.
My goodness. Oh, I must go and watch that now.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
So no, I haven't seen it since I was a kid. So
I definitely wouldn't recommend it.
I've not seen that.
Oh, really? Is it bad?
It's not good.
I suspect it's probably not.
I say that as a horror fan first and foremost, Wes Craven fan in particular. It's not good.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, it is about a serial killer's ghost jumping through TV stations, isn't it? To possess people, and
the baseline was pretty low to begin with.
The only thing I remember about that film that I think probably I'd be interested to see the scene again, just in case it held up, but I remember it working very well, is when he's initially being executed and he's somehow trained himself to be immune to electricity so it doesn't kill him. And he does this whole like, is that all you've got thing, and gets, and I remember that being kind of freaky. I remember that being like, I mean, it's probably like really over the top and ham now, but I do remember that feeling quite an effective scene.
I remember the latter scenes of the film where you've got Horace and some kid, I believe, who's like contrived some way of chasing him through the television stations. They're literally fighting through like TV shows and film sets, and it's so silly. It's so ridiculously silly.
Anyway, my apologies. I've done the complete opposite of what you employed me to do, which is to keep you.
You've derailed us. It's okay. So there's two more things I want to hit. I want to end with a question. I've got a question that I want to ask, and it's a kind of alt reality question about the path not traveled. But we'll come to that. Before we get there, I want to talk about. Well, I want to talk about two things, but they're very closely related. Actually, I want to talk about the chapel. And relatedly, what I want to talk about, which is the other massive strength of the show that we really haven't talked about yet, the fucking art design on this show. And I think that the chapel's a good place to talk about it, because the centerpiece of the chapel, that giant oak wood table.
It's a thing of beauty, isn't it?
With the Reaper carved into it. Now, again, I've been listening to this show with Theo Rossi and Kim Coates talking about the show. One of the things they talk about is how whenever anybody came to visit the set for Sons of Anarchy, without fail, everyone wanted to have their photo taken in the chapel.
Of course.
Everyone wanted to be sat at that table with that Reaper. And I think the Reaper design, the patch design, is just a thing of absolute beauty.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of a manifesto for the show as well, isn't it? Like,
Absolutely,
it's marked everyone in the show. These people belong to me.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yes, very much so.
And I love the symbolism of it. I mean, it's not subtle, obviously, but the fact that the scythe is made of a automatic machine gun, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The handle is actually like a, whatever, AK-47 or Kalashnikov or something, like, like it's a automatic machine gun. The symbolism of the red drops of blood on the coming off the blade. You've already mentioned, Steve, the fact that the Men of Mayhem patch.
Mm-hmm.
And what that signifies, and the people that get it and that don't. Oh, a little aside, I have to say as well, the other thing that always makes me laugh is the notion of like this uber macho, like none more masculine, none more hetero fucking group. And then part of the thing that you do as soon as you get promoted is you break out your sewing kit. That just makes me laugh every time I think of it.
Yeah, and they all have them. They've all got
badges. These super double tough motherfuckers are all sat there with their fucking sewing kits and thimbles because they just got.
Ultimately, I mean, they have more fidelity to their rules than any fucking Boy Scout does, don't they?
By some distance,
they love to advertise themselves as the ultimate outlaws, when in fact they're the ultimate authoritarians and conformists.
Well, no, I don't know about that. That's one of the things I find interesting. Is in principle. And I don't want to, open a can of worms of talking about political philosophy with 8 minutes to go. But I do think it's significant to me that at least in principle, they are they seem to conduct themselves through a form of radical democracy. Mm-hmm. Action. Their government structure is a proposal happens, a debate happens, and then there's a fucking vote.
There's a vote, yeah.
And what's really interesting as we go on, it's not really in this season, it developed in later season, you learn that for some votes, you've got to have not just a majority, but unanimity.
For a mayhem vote, yes.
For a mayhem vote, right? And and the implication there is there may be other votes that are similar, of a similar level of...
Yeah.
So again, So again, there's an implied mythology here. There's an implied kind of structure. And that really interests me, because there is a scene I think it's in the Patchover episode where it is, because Jax goes off by himself and he finds this bit of graffiti that his father talked about, and it's an anarchy quote about anarchy and about the ideals of it. And again, I know this stuff drops away later, but in season 1, I think it's really interesting how a big part of what the show's about is about the gap within the club itself between its ideals and its reality. And it's not quite as simple either as Clay, as Clay's shadow structure, although that is a part of it, Clay and Tig. And again, watching it this time, it really jumped out to me how much even Tig was the one really leading on the violence. That's fascinating to me, because I always have Clay as the kind of arch manipulator, but it's not really, it's more complicated than that. But it's also stuff like they have the vote, but then there's another scene where they all, a smaller group, and this time it's Clay, Jax and Bobby and Opie and Tig, and it's just the 5 or 6 of them, and they're sitting around and they're like, oh yeah, so we're gonna kill this Port Authority guy, right? Yeah, we need to do that. Who's gonna do it? And again, that's why isn't that happening at the table? Why is that not a vote? Instead, this inner circle that's deciding on this assassinate, because that's a big fucking deal. Right. That is, I'm not saying these people, obviously they've killed people at this point in the show, that's established, but it's still that should surely be a club decision, and yet it's not. So there's that fascinates me, the kind of structure.
There is a pantomimic there's a pantomimic element to the democratic qualities of the club. They only take the vote when they know that it's not that significant, really,
or when they know what the result.
And even if it's against, like if the ultimate vote is against the certain agendas within the club, then the agendas happen anyway.
Well, that's where the question of loyalty keeps coming back up, and I love that conversation between Opie and Jax in season 1, where where Opie says, "Oh, Clay's got a couple of years, and then you'll be in charge." And Jax is like, "Yeah, okay, but Bobby, Tig, Piney, where the fuck are they going to go? What are they going to do? They're not going to, Jack's understanding that the problem he's got is way, way bigger than Clay.
Yeah, right.
And
the fact that all of these people have sold themselves to this structure
Yeah.
So when it's gone, where do they go?
Yeah. No, I love all that, and I really do. Like, I am fascinated, and like it's a little touch, but the fucking gavel.
Yeah.
Just the fact of that, you know, that because again, it's that anarchist thing of like, no, we're judge, jury, and executioners. We are justice. Yeah. Collectively, we are justice, and that is like, this is heavy shit, man. You know, this is. And I love the way it does that, and yeah, the club immediately undermines itself with how it behaves, and you can read that as an inherent flaw in anarchy, or you can read it as a flaw of trying to do anarchy in a capitalist society, or you can just read it as the flaws of these particular men, right? I mean, you can slice that any way you want. I mean, that's open to interpretation. But I do love how this, you know, biker action show is also operating on that level, as well as the Shakespearean Greek tragedy stuff we've talked about. It's also kind of at least kicking these ideas about a little bit.
Right, yeah. It's drawing questions, isn't it, about democratic systems, or seemingly democratic systems.
Yeah, no, I like all that. So that I just wanted to put my finger, and again, the design, the art design, the patches on the Mayans as well, by the way. Their patch design is absolutely gorgeous as well. It's just beautiful art. Okay, I promised to end with a question. Here is my question. It's the final episode of the season, and Jax and Clay are sat in the chapel.
Oh, sorry. Can I just interject briefly, Kit?
Please,
just reminded me of something. I don't know why I suddenly made that link, but I don't want to break your. I'm going to end on a question.
No, go for it.
Well for me. I just want to say, and I've got nothing really to discuss here. I just want to make a statement that in the final segment of the final episode of season 1, how much of a cock is Jax?
Yeah.
His best friend's wife has been murdered.
Yeah.
He rocks up to the funeral late
and still drunk from the night before.
Still drunk.
Yeah.
Wanders over. Oh, I'll toss a flare on that. Now I'm going to fuck off.
Yeah. Snogged his girlfriend. Puts his patch on.
Very close proximity to the grave, by the way.
Right by the grave, yes. Yeah, there's no decorum there whatsoever. And this is after having spent a drunken night, having borrowed a blanket from the might be a ghost, might be an angel woman who we haven't even mentioned.
Yes.
Talk about her.
The almost Dickensian character who turns up.
So anyway, that was it. I just wanted to point out that he's a complete fucking douche canoe in that scene.
He is. And then just goes and hangs out with his dead dad for a while.
And then just fucks off to his dad's grave. Which again will come back later on.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And I think as well, if we're going to mention that, I should also I feel compelled to also mention the absolutely fucking amazing fist fight that he has with Tig in the house. Yeah. Although going back to my earlier point about this show is really stupid sometimes, that whole witness protection fucking thing is so stupid. That whole thing like the whole idea of like, oh yeah, it's really easy to crack witness protection. Like, it's literally never fucking happened in the history of witness protection. ever. Like, it's uncrackable. Like, fuck off with that. Oh no, we're a biker gang. We can do it in an afternoon.
Yeah, but anybody that's previously hasn't had Deputy Sheriff Trammell on board.
Who's another side character we haven't had time to talk about, but is and again a lovely performance. I mean, there's just no bad actors in the show, I don't think.
You're absolutely right. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. But that whole sequence is insane, and again, like, really. So after you. By the way, where do the 3 officers that they captured go after they where are they? Don't know. Oh yeah. Well, let's just take our masks off. By the way, why, if you've got the only Scottish man in California, you send him?
That.
Yeah, that's true.
What the fuck are you doing here?
I mean, it's the same thing as I always, every time I watch this, I always question when they go and kill the Port Authority guy, why send Bobby Elvis, the most identifiable man in the club?
True. Yeah. Maybe the most known, most visible man in Charming. Yeah, I mean, well, look, then we're gonna have this whole conversation.
Who also publicly performs as Elvis.
Yeah. Let's also, I mean, look, we'll touch on it now. Again, we can go back to it maybe next time. The video game logic of like, oh, I've taken my patch off so no one knows I'm in the biker gang now.
Right.
Like, you're still riding a fucking motorbike. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, your rings still say Sons of Anarchy. Like, I don't. What the? Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever.
The tattoos and whatnot very clearly identify you, right?
And then that whole thing of like, oh no, what Jax's audible Hail Mary call is like, I'm going to take your mask off, show you the faces of two of the men who've just tried to kill you, and then say, run away or we'll kill you next time. Okay,
Right.
whatever. But all of that said, just the visceral way that fist fight is shot between Tig and Jax. And what I love about it is because I was watching it this time, I've rewatched it, and part of me was watching it thinking like, Tig's a fucking ex-Marine, there is no way he loses this fight. There's a moment in the fight you watch, Tig actually gives up.
Yeah.
He lets Jax beat him.
Right.
He actually does it because he's like, I deserve this punishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. You watch it starts as a proper fight, and then there's a moment where Tig's actually like, you know what, I deserve a beating.
I have this coming.
Yeah, it's really, and it's such a good performance. And the way it's shot as well, it's shot wonderfully. That one, they get really close with the handhelds. It's really chaotic, and they're sweating their asses off. They look really thick. It's a great sequence. It's a great fight. Really stupid.
Actually, in terms of like the artistry of TV violence, this show does really well. Generally, it often feels very weighty and very real.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, and the violence is well choreographed. I mean, the gunfights are ridiculous, but they're deliberately ridiculous. They're cinematic. They're like westerns. I think when you go into the gunfight,
that's it exactly.
Working in a western mode, and I'm fine with that. But the fist fights, I think, are really good, even though it's happening in the most ludicrous. Because it's like you've literally just sprayed DNA all over this fucking house. Like, what are you doing? I'm sorry, I said I'm stopped. It does bother me a little bit, clearly. Anyway. All of that aside, I want to end on a question because I know we've got to wrap up, but I want to end on a question. So it's season 13. We're sitting in the chapel and we've got Clay and Jax, and it's one of my favorite scenes in season 1, and it's obviously a pivotal scene for the remainder of the show. It's a fulcrum moment actually. It's when Jax looks Clay in the eyes and he says to him, "You told me once we sat in this room and you promised this was nothing to do with you. I am asking you now." And he says this, brother to brother, father to son. Did you try and kill Opie? Did you accidentally kill Opie's wife? And my question to the two of you is, what happens if Clay says yes? Because I think he thinks about it. I think if you watch Perlman's performance, Perlman, by the fucking way, Jesus fucking Christ. I know he's Ron Perlman and it's a redundant thing to say. What a fucking actor. What a screen actor this man is.
He's superb, isn't he?
He is in this.
He really is superb. I mean, watching Perlman's performance, I mean, because of it sounds so strange, but because of the way he looks, I imagine that half the time he's deliberately underperforming.
Yeah, I think that's
so that it doesn't come across as too big, right?
Yeah. God. Just masterful. But I think
long term, in answer to your question, exactly what happened.
Yeah. See, that's what I think too.
Yeah, because ultimately it doesn't matter. The answer doesn't matter, does it? Because Jax already knows, right?
Yeah, Jax knows the answer.
He already knows, and Clay already knows that Jax knows, right? So the answer is kind of redundant.
Okay, so then the question becomes, then why does he lie? Because I think you're right. I thought about it a lot, and I thought actually, the beauty of it is it's a fulcrum moment, but also it doesn't matter what he says.
That's it.
That's really fucking cool if you think about that in storytelling terms. Because again, we're back to the fact that this is a Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
And the thing about tragedy is it's inevitable. This is about fate. This is about a dark destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Gemma uses that line. She says Jax is going to go on a destiny run. That's the phrase she uses, destiny run. She's talking to Clay. It's exactly what he does over the next 6 seasons. That is the entire plot of the show, really. So I love that. I love that it's a fulcrum moment, and yet actually whatever answer he gives doesn't matter because it's the whole thing is a giant Venus flytrap, and they're all stuck in it, and they're all slowly being dissolved by it. But then the question is, why does Clay lie? Is it plausible deniability? Is it because he doesn't know what else to do?
No, it's because he can't admit that he's done wrong in that chair, in that room.
Right. Right. Okay.
The king does not admit fallibility from his throne.
Right. So
you're right. They both know.
Yeah.
They both know the truth.
Yeah.
They both know that the other knows the truth.
Yeah.
But so there's no purpose to plausible deniability.
Right.
It is just. I think it is just that. It's just that Clay is incapable. Probably anywhere, actually. Clay is incapable, particularly to Jackson, who is his pseudo son.
Yeah.
And vice president. He is incapable of admitting to Jackson, I made the wrong call.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Because it's lethal to him, isn't it? It's lethal to his position if he does. I mean, obviously, in this situation, it's lethal to his life as well, but it's lethal to his authority.
Yeah, if he's seen as fallible on one issue, he's seen as fallible on all issues.
Yeah.
And what I love is the choice of words with which he delivers the lie, because he says, I love Opie. I loved Donna. Both of which are true statements.
I was going to say, which is not necessarily a lie, is it?
And then, I would never do nothing to hurt them. And that's such an amazing formulation when you think about how it played out. Because obviously he didn't pull the trigger, right?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I love it because
it's literally true.
Exactly, and you can see he kind of believes it when he's saying it almost. Yeah. And the performance in the eyes, man. Oh. Anyway, yeah, cool. I just wanted to zoom in on that because it is amazing.
It is an amazing scene.
It is.
Yeah. Because it is the fulcrum point, isn't it? That's where everything else spirals from in the 6 seasons that follow.
And arguably, if you think about it, what that really does mean is, even before we get to the horrific finale of season 3 and start season 4, it was always all Tig's fault.
I suppose it was.
It was all Tig's fault because Tig's the one who says he's got to go. He's got to go. Tig's the guy who pulls the trigger and shoots the wrong fucking person.
Tig's the guy who gets freaked out with the dolls.
It's all Tig's fault.
I mean, I just assume that everything in the world is Tig's fault.
Why do I like this guy? Why do I like him?
And I'll make this my final point on the matter. But, and as has been the case for the last 2 hours, I will preempt future seasons. It is all Tig's fault. Yes. It all stems from Tig, and yet who gets the happy ending? Literally and figuratively. The nearest
thing the show delivers to a happy ending. That is, yeah. God, that's a frightening statement right there.
Isn't it terrifying?
Well, so basically, what we're saying is, no good deed goes unpunished.
Because if exactly
that's
that.
Brilliant. That's so good.
It's the nihilism of the show crystallized, isn't it?
I think that's the perfect note on which to end our discussion of season 1.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Well,
thank you both for indulging me for a couple of hours.
No, it was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no, we'll do this. We'll try and do this again soon. So I guess
we're going to do every season. Yeah,
we are definitely 100%.
Yeah,
fabulous.
I'm in for that.
Fabulous.
Okay, should we do the usual wrapping up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, what do you want to pimp out?
I'll let Steve think about that question for a second. I just realised.
Can I answer that? What I want to pimp out is Venus Van Dam.
No, you can't. No, you absolutely cannot do that. You really can't.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think I'll just do the usual. Really, My Life in Horror is coming to its conclusion. But if you want to catch the My Life in Horror essays, they go up in Ginger Nuts and Horror Monthly. Go to Ginger Nuts and Horror. My Life in Horror is the column there. That's my non-fiction work. You want to find my fiction work? Go to Amazon and search under books for Kit Power. You can find every story I've got out. I've got a new book coming out called Ebb Tides from Hersham Horror, featuring my story Hands on Deck. That's been edited by James Everington and features some incredibly talented horror writers as well as me. So look out for that one. If you're going to buy ebooks, buy them from Amazon. If you're going to buy paperbacks, and you do have a local bookstore, maybe go down there and pick them up. All my books have ISBN, so that's not a problem. And if you want to get new content from me every single week, sometimes it's audio, sometimes it's reviews, non-fiction essays, or fiction, short stories, novel extracts, etc. Patreon.com/KitPower. $1 a month will get you something new from me every week.
Fabulous. Links below as per usual, ladies and gents.
Steve?
Hello. Sorry. Yes. Damn it. Cue me in future. Yeah. Okay. So, Black Shuck Books. blackshuckbooks.co.uk.
Yes.
Is my publishing company that I own and run. Big release this month. 2 big releases this month. Penny Jones' debut collection, which is called Beyond the Broken Smile.
Oh,
Fantastic.
I love Penny's work. I love it to bits.
Well, then you know where to come.
Yeah.
And of course, it's September, and September means my flagship anthology, Great British Horror.
Of course.
7 this year.
Of course, yes.
Volume 7.
Wow.
Remarkably. It's called Major Arcana. It is stories informed, albeit not on the subject of, the Major Arcana from Tarot.
Tarot. Yeah.
Featuring such luminaries as Conrad Williams is in this year's. Anna Taborska has written me a new story.
Oh.
Malcolm Devlin is in here. Gary Budden is in here. Booker nominee Alison Moore is in here.
Wow.
British Fantasy Award winning podcaster Jonathan Sims, creator of the Magnus Archives podcast, has written me.
Oh, superb.
And Linda E. Rucker is my international guest author this year.
Jeez.
So
Fantastic.
that is being launched, as is Penny's book, at FantasyCon next weekend. And the official release is the end of September. blackshuckbooks.co.uk for any and all of my produce.
Fantastic.
Excellent. As per usual, guys, links below. Highly, highly recommended. I have quite a few of the Black Shuck collections, and they're all absolutely stunning. I've got to say, beautiful books. I want the whole lot eventually. I want a
Well, that
bookshelf
can
full of.
quite easily be achieved. Oh, sorry. One other thing as well. Disregard what Power says. If you want paperbacks or ebooks, go to the publisher's website.
Oh, yeah, sorry, where appropriate. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
Excellent. Again, ladies and gents,
I'll take that on the
links.
chin. That's fair.
Links down there. As for myself, same as usual, guys. You can find me knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy, where you'll find podcasts like this. I'm still doing a Let's Play of Bloody Elden Ring, some 200 videos later. Yeah, I will finish it one day, I'm sure. One day, maybe.
Talking
before I
of
die.
masochism.
Yeah. Maybe one day before I die, who knows. In terms of my published work, you can find links to all of my short story collections over at strangeplaygrounds.com, and also to my Born in Blood volumes 1 and 2 over at Perpetual Motion Machine Publications. If you'd like to come and chat to me, you can chat to me over at Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy. Well, guys, thank you so much. This was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I look
Fun for hours.
Yeah, I look forward to gathering around the Redwood table for season 2.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming soon, Henry Rollins.
Oh, yes.
Yay! Until next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
boys.
Cool.